We always talk about technology. And the thing with technology, and if I look at this room, we're talking about the C-suite on the technology level. It was a realization when I got the invite from ISOG and XMS to speak. The executive playbook, we're talking about the members of the board who are not tech people. They are totally clueless of quite a number of words that we use, especially when, right now, the quarter is fit. We are going to ask our board for money, resources that we will need to use for implementation next year. In the same breath, they are going to give us a checklist of what they expect for us to deliver. And this is where it is very critical for us to be able to sell to them and get their buy-in on what they want us to do and the budget that we need to do that. So how do we now align everything? Let's start with the basics. You had a different look on your face. Are you familiar with that sound? So for those who are laughing, this means we are now connected to the internet. There are 4 inflection points in the last 4 decades. The first one is internet. The second one is mobility. Mobile devices, laptops connecting to Wi-Fi. And because we're now connected, the challenge of storage became an issue until there was cloud. Now we have internet, the device that can connect, cloud that can store the information, and the data that falls within. But because we need that information to be done quicker, faster, now comes AI. The most used word in the last 2-3 years. So, that said, cyber is definitely an enterprise concern. It is not just a technology concern. It is not just a security concern. It is a business concern. We focus on value. And the reason we call it the executive playbook, the board has to understand that value. It affects business. It affects the valuation. It affects everything that we're doing as an organization. But on top of that one, we also have to recognize, if we move into the digital space, threat actors are out there. The threat vector is expanding. Yes, we are tapping third parties. Why? Training people is a challenge. Retaining people is doubly the challenge. You know, today I will train for this kind of technology, and tomorrow I'll be surprised they might be joining XMS. So it is a cycle that I will have to repeat. But I will also have to consider succession. These are strategies that the board requires of each one of us here. So on the board level, there are 4 cornerstones that have to be adopted, which they have to understand, which all of us will have to explain and get their buy-in from. The first one is to protect the value of the organization. The second is for them to understand that they too are participative in the choices that we make, that they instruct. But there are activities that happen within that they have to be responsible for. And to include that one, not only is the process inside the company, but we will also have to include the third parties, our partners, the service level agreements, the expectations that we set. And lastly, we have to be informed of things that had happened, will happen, can happen, and more critical, how do you react from the level of the board to its officers and to everybody in the middle and then down? You're talking about the executive, the administrative, and the technical. The choices and the decisions made at every level are different, but it has to sync up. So, institutionalizing such resilience require and demand that each activity be monitored. For every pillar that we put in, it is the foundation of what will be moving forward. This is very critical. It is always being told, when you talk about cybersecurity, you talk about cyber resilience, threat actors, they look at two sets of people, the CIOs and the CISOs. And always, as a teasing remark, I say, when a problem arises, and it is related to either a program, an application, or a computer, everybody in the organizational chain will always say, that's not mine, it's IT's. Correct? The other, even in the operational sector, facilities management, property, security, you name it, they will implement their own, will not bring in the IT folks. They will select their own third parties, will not bring in the IT folks. We're talking about both IT, network, infra, apps, security. Not be brought in. They will do it on their own because we can. And if something happens, first thing they do, call IT. The second thing, if it's a threat actor comes through, first thing they do, call the CISO. Thing is, both parties were never involved in the planning stages. So, what's the path moving forward? It's a call to action. Each pillar, each cornerstone has its own priority, but the board has to respond correspondingly. So, if you're going to align the strategy to your board, there has to be a key performance indicator to boot. It's nice to talk about it every time, but there has to be an action item for every stage. Each stage will have to be determined. As an example, it is always said, it is a business concern. Who disagrees, who agrees? Those in agreement. Anything that happens in a company is a business concern. Yes? Okay. I'll give you an example. Earthquake drill. Duct, cover, hold. Is there disruption? We stop our operations for at least 4 hours. Nothing moves, nothing performs. In any entity, like for example, within a day, it's 1 billion. Your revenue is 1 billion a day, and you stop for 4 hours. What happens? Automatically, it becomes half a billion. You lose 500 million. It's a business concern. Here's the thing. The board allowed it. When we talk about generators undergoing preventive maintenance, we sometimes, in terms of testing, in IT, we do the same. Let's knock out the power, let the generators run to see if it will function, and see what else will function and not function. It is a business concern. It is disruption. We stop the operation. Why? Not all the elevators are working, not all the air conditionings are on, not all the computers will be running. The board allowed it. It is a business concern. Sometimes they will say on a financial language, it is a calculated risk, a calculated loss. We have also calculated the recovery. Hence, why when you start your ecosystem, let's calculate it already. We always do a reaction. When something hits, that is the only time we react. Many years ago, nobody wanted to buy an insurance, acts of God, because it never floods. When Ondoy happened, oh my God, I saved, I scrimped on 500 and my car is floating underwater. So immediately after, the price changes. But all these reactions into the cornerstones is reactive. To be proactive, to be resilient, to be able to stand when things happen is one thing. But to be able to understand what you are going to react to when something does happen, it is the same reason why we do the fire drills. Where do you pass? Where do you walk? No matter how tedious. You're located at what floor and you're going to walk down the stairway, and by the time you hit ground floor, your knees and legs are shaking. You're unsure if you're able to go back up. But that is part of the exercise. And the key takeaway, management has to be involved. Question is, how do you make them understand? So, in the next, we always say, 30, 60, 90, but this is actually doing 90, 180, 270, 360. Within the next 12 months, these are the things that you have to do. You will have to tell your board what will happen, why it has to happen. On the C-suite level, when a threat happens and you're locked down, guess what? Everything is reactive. We're not saying we're going to be hacked. We're saying we are being ready. It is the same as the fire drill. The board accepts that one, then they will have to accept this one. Market value at 17% are safeguarded, which means a whole lot larger number is yet preparing itself. In terms of AI, you're using the tool. 65% of the Philippines is now undergoing its initial journey. The difficulty, why it's still at 65% on the initial phases, we're stuck in between defending to our board who does not understand IT what we're talking about. They understand losing money. They understand the business value. Then we, at this level, will have to change. We should be able to react in less than 4 hours to be able to recover and restore everything after we are hacked. But the steps to be undertaken, what will the CEO do? What will legal do? What will PR do? What will HR do? Each participant within the organizational structure is critical. So as a conclusion, we always say there is a human in that loop. In any ecosystem or structure, it is very important. If you want to be resilient on cyber, then you will have to understand that human in that loop, that's you, is very critical. Your insight, your instinct, the ability to be discerning on what goes on, whether good or bad, and to be able to lead your board to tell them, this is how you should react. You will have to be strong about it. You will have to be firm about it. Every step you take is savings on their part. If you can convert it, there is what you call FAIR. That can now translate the value of technology. We're doing it every time, but we'll have to translate it in the words that they use. The buy-in is critical. You can test that come this end of quarter when your budgets are being requested. But at the end of the day, everybody is doing it, including the threat actors. So they're using the same tools. What now makes the difference? The human in the loop. That's all of you. And with that, thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Rookie. Okay, so I'll jump right into it. But again, we'll keep the floor open if there are any questions from the audience, all right? Because this is definitely a topic very, very close to all of our hearts. So let's start with the first question. We say that cyber resilience starts at the top, right? And that's something that's practically a mantra for the cyber leaders in the room. So what would be one leadership practice that has made the biggest difference in strengthening resilience across organizations?
Let's talk about on the business language. It's called adoption and improvisation. It's also AI. And if you talk about those two items, people at the board level, you'd be surprised. They do not ask structured questions. They actually ask you off-tangent questions. As an example, we need cyber. I have a CISO here, especially with his former organization with total number of branches. You're talking about areas that are hard to reach, and then you talk about cybersecurity. If you ask them, some board members who are not tech savvy will tell you, we've existed for over 80 plus years. We've never been hit. Why would I need that? The other, will it improve the bottom line? If I buy this, does it translate to income? Not ROI. We're talking about income of the company. But what is overlooked? Every time there's a shoe on your foot, you stumble. Nobody took acts of God until the floods came. In the Philippines, I teasingly call it chicken. In Filipino, we call it pisil-pisilin, amoy-amoyin, osyoso-osyosohin. In English, we say, you'll have to feel it, you'll have to smell it, and you have to be able to observe it. Everything has to be visual. Same like AI. You cannot govern what you cannot see. The board is critical. If we are able to make them understand the elements, especially if and when you get hit, we're never saying a fire will happen in the building, but we have seen more than enough examples of fire happening in other buildings. We'll have to translate that into their language. If this happens, you are expected to react this way. One of the things is, sometimes they call it executive deniability or the pass on of responsibility. But each member of the board has a role to play. You get hit, you get published in the news. Who faces? Who reacts? How quick do you react? Each one will have a role to play. We're not saying we're gonna get hit, but when we do, we're ready.
It's really not a question of we will be, but we're ready in case it does happen. Parang insurance lang, di ba? You don't buy it because you expect to be hit.
True. Everybody would always say insurance is, I'll get it when I get hit. But when you get hit and you didn't get it, shucks, I should have gotten it. Regret is always at the end. But there's a translation. I mean, it's a little bit morbid when you say, I am going to get myself a life plan. So when I pass on from this planet, I have something ready. But it's not for me. True. Why? It's for your family who you leave behind. Because if you leave behind without that plan, the first thing that the family will be saying, look at that imbecile. They left us with a debt. I have to pay for the following. He wasn't ready. No, we don't want to be in that place.
Right. Interestingly, like you've talked about the board, right? Because then my next question is something that you've probably all experienced. How do you keep now cyber resilience part of the executive agenda? Because there are competing requirements or responsibilities in the organization. So how do you keep it top of mind? How do you keep it in front of them?
You have to include it in your schedule. We do the fire drills, yes? Even the government mandates earthquake drills, duct, cover, hold. We accept it. The board accepts it. That's why I was saying earlier, we accept for it to stop business. It's a calculated risk. It's a calculated loss. Do we keep elements within the organization moving? Yes. Lean. Who gets to stay? Who gets the priority to have a productivity or risk bonus? These are the people. Somebody will be chosen to stay, the rest will have to go. But that's the thing. We do the red-blue teams. Did we include the board? I've done a lot of red-blues and we are talking about everybody. This is how you react. I never saw my chairman part of that team. Because at that level, they have to have their own red-blue, which aligns, which I was saying, executive, administrative, and technical. The three should align. Each one should sync. How they react, a response on the lower levels will react the same on a different position. But they will have to be included in that.
And since you've talked about the executive, the admin, and the technical, right? Because earlier you mentioned anything that happens in everything that happens in a company is a business concern.
It is.
So now, what do you believe is, at least for the executive team, not just the CISO, what role should they play in building a resilient organization? So let's take the CISO out of the picture. What is everyone else's role in it?
One of the more difficult things when you work with members of the board who does not understand IT, who does not understand cybersecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Philip Casanova is here. He actually had a nice topic. The reason I'm including him, he has a very nice topic. It's about culture and people. You will have to include your board. But when you do, there's a thing in banking, in finance, FSIs. It's called KYC, knowing your client. But in this case, knowing your higher-ups. Each one functions, and they have a manner as to how they function. I was sharing with him a story earlier at the holding room. One of the most senior executives of one of the largest companies here in the Philippines gave an email instruction to a middle manager. I need funds allocated and transmitted to the following account. So it through. Email from the big boss. It hit the treasurer. The treasurer goes, who instructed you? Manager goes, Big boss. Treasurer's reaction, are you crazy? Why? The big boss never uses the emails. He still uses the old school fax machine. Paper and pen and send it to you by fax. That's why if you look at their office, there are old school fax machines still working in their offices. This is where the people and culture will come into play. Where you involve your board, it will also have to include understanding the members of your board. Is this how they think? Is this how they call? You get messages. I get messages. Fun part is, I got a message new number from the president of the company, who I grew up with since I was 4 years old. What did I do? Called him on the number that I know. You messaged me on a new number. Do you have a new number? No. But impeccably, greatly done. Nice message as though it were him. So we will have to consider both.
All right. Before I close out the session, are there any questions from the rest? Yes, please.
I wanted to ask you, like everywhere it is AI, cybersecurity is also affected by AI. But why the board level people are not discussing about AI governance, but they're discussing about AI implementations? How do you see the challenges there?
The definition of AI, the last, I spoke to 10 people, I got 10 answers, all different, on what AI is. But we will have to go back to, that's why I played the internet sound. We have to go back to basics. What is AI? AI is all about data. No data, there's no such thing as AI. The second, the old guards call it digital transformation. You will have to talk about the data that you're using, who's using it, how they're using it, who's owning it, the process within the organization that transfers the information. And then you move into a situation similar to Excel. Who among you uses VLOOKUP, pivot tables? You're familiar? And then you place within that structure if then else. Those conditions are similar to AI. We're talking about a different data package and then we're organizing it in a manner that can be translated into an outcome. The biggest difference is that outcome now, which a lot of people would say, oh, there's good and bad data. There's no such thing. You're controlling a set of information within your table. It's like your glass of water. If I drop a teaspoon of Coca-Cola in your very clear water, the water changes. The reason they call it bad data, because it is not within the set that you're trying to control. You have a variable called X, which is undefined. This now shifts the outcome that you're targeting because you have not considered something. But this is where also the likes of generative AI comes into play. Every time we walk through a process of digital transformation, input, process, output, that outcome now goes back to the start as part of the new information, and then you run it through. AI is objective-based. You give it an instruction, it will run continuously, and it will not stop. But it will now look at new data every time it finishes one, it goes back, and then runs again. Data is always new. And the reason the board is asking for why not expecting an outcome, why not the adoption, because they wouldn't know better. Because everybody thinks it's a magic pill. I take it. Let's use AI and all your problems will be fixed. Have you heard of that? My favorite is the last one. We're going to adopt AI. We're going to implement AI to increase our revenue. And I'm thinking, why? Are we losing in any market sector? Our salespeople are not performing? When I actually said that to the board, the director of sales almost threw his glass at me. Nuts. But that's the thing. This is where I was saying earlier, it is now falling within the people in this room to be that human in the loop, to explain it to the board what it actually means. And then yes, you will get your adoption. We will be improving that 65% journey. It's going to be almost 100 if we're doing it right. And you can test it. By end of this quarter, if you do it well, you're going to get the budget that you're asking for.
All right. Thank you very much, Rookie. You know, when you're enjoying the conversation, time just really flies by fast. So please join me again in thanking Rookie for sharing his insights with us this morning. So again, love to hear your thoughts on this. So you can either scan the QR code or log on to menti.com. The code is found here on, in front. What should be the cornerstone of an executive playbook for building lasting cyber resilience? Trust. All right. You could put in one word, you could put in a sentence. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. All right, here we have synergy enterprise-wide, right? So Rookie was talking about it earlier, right? You have to go through, you have to line it all up, executive, admin, and technology. We're seeing board level support, continuous monitoring, responsibility. Great. All right.